Cash and Lorne lived a quiet life in the small colony of Meridian Prime, a world far enough from the Galactic Empire's core to feel the pulse of rebellion, yet close enough to remain under its shadow. His home, a modest dwelling nestled amid towering crimson trees, held no outward signs of his storied past. The man had been a master tactician once, a legend among humans during the wars that marked humanity's integration into the Empire. But now, he was an old man content to tend his gardens and share stories with those curious enough to visit. Cashin's son, Kevin, had inherited his brilliance but not his contentment. Kevin was the rising star of humanity's military forces, a figure of both admiration and fear among soldiers and civilians alike. The galaxy whispered of his ruthless efficiency, his victories leaving behind only ashes and surrender. Cashin had watched from a distance, proud of Kevin's accomplishments, yet uneasy about the path he had chosen. Their conversations were infrequent, reduced to terse exchanges over encrypted channels. The last time Kevin had visited, years ago, they had argued about honor, humanity's role in the galaxy, and the cost of survival. The morning it all began felt like any other. Cashin was inspecting the rows of iridescent blooms he had cultivated, their petals shimmering in the soft light of Meridian's twin suns. His peace was shattered by the distant rumble of engines. Looking up, he saw the unmistakable silhouette of an Imperial gunship cutting through the sky. His heart sank. The Empire rarely sent such vessels for routine inspections or petty grievances. The gunship landed heavily in the clearing near his home, dislodging soil and scattering leaves. From its belly emerged a squad of Imperial soldiers in their stark white armor, led by an officer whose uniform was so pristine it seemed designed to intimidate. The officer, a lean man with sharp features and a voice like steel, approached with deliberate steps. "Cashin Lorne," the officer began, his tone devoid of pleasantry. "You are hereby accused of conspiring with insurgents against the Galactic Empire. Step forward and surrender yourself for interrogation." Cashin wiped his hands on a cloth, his movements unhurried. He studied the officer, noting the arrogance in his stance and the way his hand hovered near his blaster. "Conspiring with insurgents?" Cashin said, his voice calm but edged with disbelief. "You've come to accuse an old man tending his garden of rebellion." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Don't play coy. We have evidence linking you to rebel activity. This colony has harbored dissenters for years. You'll answer for your crimes." Cashin sighed, his weariness evident. "If you're so certain of my guilt, why waste time with accusations? Do what you came to do." The soldiers shifted uneasily, their weapons trained on the old man. The officer's jaw tightened. "Search the premises," he barked, and two soldiers moved toward Cashin's home. As they began their search, Cashin stood his ground, his gaze never wavering from the officer. "You're making a mistake," he said softly. "The seeds of rebellion you're so desperate to uproot. Your actions here will only water them." The officer sneered. "Spare me the philosophy. The Empire tolerates no disobedience, no matter how small." Moments later, the soldiers returned, their search yielding nothing incriminating. The officer's frustration was palpable. "You've hidden it well, old man, but we'll find it. Arrest him." Cashin did not resist as the soldiers moved to restrain him, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to their aggression. As they bound his wrists, he looked at the officer one last time. "You think you're enforcing order," he said, his voice steady, "but you're only creating chaos. And chaos has a way of striking back." The officer's patience snapped. He drew his blaster and leveled it at Cashin's chest. "Enough of your riddles. Let this serve as a lesson to those who defy the Empire." The shot rang out, silencing the forest. Cashin crumpled to the ground, his body motionless among the flowers he had so carefully tended. In the stillness that followed, the soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Even they seemed shaken by the cold execution. The officer holstered his weapon, his expression unreadable. "Clean this up," he ordered, his voice tight. The news of Cashin Lorne's death traveled quickly, reaching ears both loyal and rebellious. Among those who received the message was Kevin Lorne, far away on the edge of the Orion Nebula, where the Empire waged another of its endless wars. The message was brief and clinical, delivered through an encrypted channel Kevin almost didn't check that day. Kevin read the words once, twice, and then again, his mind refusing to accept their meaning. His father, dead, executed by the Empire he had once served. The silence in his quarters grew oppressive. Memories flooded Kevin's mind. His father teaching him strategy with carved wooden pieces on a game board, his voice patient yet firm as he explained the importance of foresight and restraint. He remembered the arguments, too, his father's insistence on principles Kevin had long abandoned. Kevin's hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his desk. A wave of fury surged through him, hot and consuming. He had spent years perfecting the art of war, mastering every tool of destruction the galaxy had to offer. But now, his skills felt hollow, his victories meaningless. This wasn't just a loss. It was an insult, a desecration of the man who had shaped him. And the Empire, blind to its error, had no idea what storm it had unleashed. Kevin rose from his chair, his expression cold and determined. He issued orders to his subordinates, his voice sharp and unwavering. The time for measured restraint had passed. If the Empire wanted chaos, Kevin would give it to them, on a scale they couldn't comprehend. As he prepared for the path ahead, Kevin allowed himself one final thought of his father. "I will honor you," he whispered, his voice low and steady, "in the only way I know how." And with that, Kevin Lorne set his sights on vengeance, the seeds of rebellion already beginning to bloom. Kevin Lorne stood at the command deck of his flagship, the Vindicator, a silent figure amidst the hum of activity. The crew worked with mechanical precision, their movements a testament to the discipline he demanded. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched endlessly, a vast canvas of opportunity and peril. Kevin's face was unreadable, but within him churned a storm that would reshape the galaxy. The weight of his father's death had not dulled with time. If anything, it had sharpened his focus, hardened his resolve. Cassian Lorne had been more than a father. He had been a mentor, a compass in a chaotic galaxy. Kevin's grief had morphed into a singular purpose, dismantling the empire that had taken everything from him. To achieve this, he needed more than vengeance. He needed an army. Kevin's reputation as a ruthless tactician had already attracted whispers among those disillusioned with the empire. Soldiers, mercenaries, and deserters, those who had felt the empire's iron grip but lacked the means to resist, began to gravitate toward his cause. Kevin did not waste time with grand speeches or promises of glory. His recruits saw his resolve in his actions, in the cold fire of his gaze. He inspired loyalty not with words, but with the certainty that he would win, no matter the cost. Among the first to join was Commander Tavin Rao, a former Imperial officer whose career had been derailed by the political machinations of his superiors. Tavin's tactical acumen and insider knowledge of the Empire's workings were invaluable, but his presence was not without tension. Kevin had little patience for those who once served the enemy, and Tavin knew it. Their exchanges were clipped, professional, and laced with unspoken challenges. Yet, over time, a grudging respect began to form, a bond forged in the crucible of shared purpose. Kevin's operations began small, targeted strikes against supply lines and outposts. Each move was calculated, a piece of a larger strategy, known only to him. He studied the Empire as one might study a predator, identifying its strengths and vulnerabilities. Every attack was precise, leaving no room for retaliation. Yet Kevin's methods were not without controversy. He was ruthless in his pursuit of victory, willing to make sacrifices that others deemed unthinkable. One such decision came when Kevin's forces intercepted a civilian freighter carrying medical supplies bound for an Imperial-controlled world. His advisors urged caution. Targeting non-military assets could alienate potential allies. Kevin listened, his expression unreadable, before giving the order to seize the freighter. The supplies, he argued, would save lives within his own ranks and deny the Empire a strategic resource. The decision was effective but polarizing, solidifying his image as a man who valued results over sentiment. Kevin's growing influence did not go unnoticed. The Empire dismissed him at first, labeling him a rogue general lashing out in the wake of personal tragedy. But as his attacks grew bolder and his forces swelled, they began to see him as a genuine threat. Propaganda broadcasts painted him as a traitor, a madman bent on destruction. Kevin watched these broadcasts with cold amusement, noting the desperation in their rhetoric. The Empire was beginning to fear him, and fear was a weapon he intended to exploit. Despite his outward composure, Kevin was not immune to doubt. In the quiet moments between battles, he would retreat to his quarters, where holographic projections of old battle simulations flickered across the walls. Many of these had been created by his father, their scenarios designed to teach the principles of strategy and honor. Kevin often found himself replaying them, searching for answers in the patterns of the past. He knew his father would not approve of his methods, but the memory of Cashin's execution silenced any lingering hesitation. There was no honor in submission, no dignity in inaction. Kevin's next move was his boldest yet, the capture of a key Imperial outpost on the remote moon of Tarvos III. The outpost controlled a vital communications relay, and its loss would disrupt the Empire's ability to coordinate its fleets in the sector. The plan was audacious, requiring precise timing and coordination. Failure would mean annihilation, but Kevin thrived under such stakes. The assault began under the cover of Tarvos III's perpetual storms, the Vindicator leading a fleet of hastily retrofitted ships. Kevin's forces overwhelmed the outpost defenses with a combination of brute force and tactical brilliance. He personally led the ground assault, his presence a rallying point for his soldiers. By the time the Empire's reinforcements arrived, the relay was in Kevin's hands, and his forces had vanished into the storm. The victory sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time, the Empire was forced to acknowledge Kevin Lorne not as a nuisance, but as a formidable adversary. Yet, even as his followers celebrated, Kevin's mind was already racing ahead. The capture of the relay was not an end but a beginning, a piece of the larger puzzle he was assembling. As Kevin stood in the aftermath of the battle, surveying the damage and the spoils, Tavin approached. "You've made your mark," Tavin said, his voice measured. "The Empire won't ignore this." Kevin's gaze didn't waver from the horizon. "Good," he replied. "Let them come. Every move they make will be another step toward their downfall." Tavin hesitated, then added, "You're playing a dangerous game, Kevin. Even the best plans can falter." Kevin turned to face him, his expression as unyielding as steel. "Then I'll adapt," he said. "This isn't a game, Tavin. It's survival. For every soldier they send, I'll raise 10. For every blow they strike, I'll strike harder. The Empire killed my father, and they will pay for it with their empire." Tavin nodded, understanding the depth of Kevin's conviction. Yet, as he walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that Kevin's path, while brilliantly calculated, was one that left no room for retreat. Kevin returned to the command deck, his presence casting a quiet authority over the crew. He issued orders with crisp efficiency, every word carrying the weight of inevitability. The galaxy was vast, the Empire seemingly insurmountable, but Kevin Lorne was undeterred. He had become a force of nature, a man driven by purpose so absolute that nothing could stand in his way. As the Vindicator jumped to hyperspace, leaving the smoldering ruins of Tarvos III behind, Kevin allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The stars stretched endlessly before him, a reminder of the vastness of the struggle he had undertaken. But Kevin was not daunted. The Empire had created him, forged him in fire and loss, and now they would face the consequences of their arrogance. His path was clear, his resolve unshakable. The galaxy would come to know his name, not as a whisper of rebellion, but as a roar that could not be silenced. Kevin Lorne would rise, and with him, the foundations of the Empire would fall. The Empire did not respond immediately to Kevin Lorne's growing insurgency, a mistake they would come to regret. For weeks, his forces operated with impunity, disrupting trade routes, raiding supply depots, and systematically dismantling the infrastructure that kept the Empire's outer territories running. Kevin knew their patience would not last, but he welcomed the inevitable retaliation. Each delay only gave him more time to prepare. The first signs of the Empire's response came in the form of fleet movements, shifts in patrol routes, an uptick in reconnaissance missions. Kevin's intelligence network, pieced together from defectors and sympathetic colonists, reported a buildup of ships and personnel in nearby sectors. It was a show of force meant to intimidate, but Kevin saw it for what it was: the Empire underestimating him once again. The attack came without warning, at the edge of the Denar Rift, where Kevin's fleet had been regrouping after their latest raid. An Imperial battle group emerged from hyperspace. The ambush was swift and brutal. Starfighters screamed through the void, their blasters lighting up the darkness. Imperial destroyers unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, cutting through the outer defenses of Kevin's fleet. On the Vindicator's bridge, alarms blared, and the crew moved with practiced urgency. Kevin stood at the center of the chaos, his expression calm but his eyes sharp, scanning the tactical displays. "Deploy the interceptors," he ordered, his voice carrying above the din. "Target their flanking ships. Keep the destroyers occupied while we reposition." Commander Tavin Rao was at his side, his hands moving quickly over the controls. "They've planned this well," Tavin muttered, his tone begrudgingly impressed. "They're boxing us in. They think they have us," Kevin replied, a faint edge of satisfaction in his voice. Let them believe it a little longer. The battle was relentless, the Vindicator shuddering under the impact of enemy fire. Kevin's forces fought with determination, their survival hinging on their leader's ability to outthink an opponent that outnumbered and outgunned them. Kevin's strategy was daring, relying on precise timing and calculated risks. He directed his ships to feint retreats, drawing the Imperials into vulnerable positions before launching counterattacks. Even as the tide began to shift, Kevin knew this was only the beginning. The Empire was testing him, probing his defenses, looking for weaknesses. This battle, though costly, was a prelude to something far larger. In the aftermath, as the battered remnants of Kevin's fleet regrouped in a remote system, the weight of the encounter began to settle. The Empire's message was clear. They would not stop until Kevin and his rebellion were annihilated. Yet Kevin was undeterred. The battle had tested his forces, yes, but it had also revealed the Empire's tactics. They were predictable in their arrogance, a flaw he intended to exploit. The next blow came not from the battlefield, but from within. One of Kevin's trusted lieutenants, a man named Dren Havoc, was exposed as an Imperial informant. The revelation sent shockwaves through the ranks, eroding trust and raising tensions. Havoc's sabotage had been subtle but devastating, compromising supply lines and leaking critical intelligence. Kevin confronted the traitor personally in the dim confines of the Vindicator's brig. Havoc, a wiry man with a face hardened by years of war, met Kevin's gaze with defiance. "You think you're any better than the Empire?" Havoc spat. "You're just another tyrant, leading fools to their deaths." Kevin's voice was low, measured. "And yet you chose to serve them. Tell me, Havoc, was it worth it?" Havoc sneered. "You don't see it, do you? This rebellion of yours. It's doomed. You're fighting an enemy you can't defeat." Kevin stepped closer, his presence suffocating. "The Empire thought the same thing when they killed my father. They underestimated what one man with a cause can do. You'll see soon enough." Without ceremony, Kevin ordered Havoc's execution, a decision that solidified his reputation as a leader who brooked no betrayal. The act was swift, but its impact lingered. It served as a grim reminder to his followers. Loyalty was not optional, and the cost of treachery was absolute. Despite the setbacks, Kevin pressed on. Each skirmish with the Empire, each betrayal, only sharpened his resolve. He began laying the groundwork for his next major offensive, a strike at the heart of the Empire's regional command. The plan was ambitious, bordering on reckless, but Kevin thrived on calculated risks. He pored over intelligence reports and star charts, crafting a strategy that would leave the Empire reeling. As preparations were underway, Tavin approached Kevin in the dimly lit war room. The holographic map of the sector cast eerie blue light across their faces. "This is bold," Tavin said, studying the plan. "Even for you?" Kevin didn't look up. Boldness is all that remains when caution no longer serves. Tavin hesitated before speaking again. "Your father, he wouldn't have done this. He believed in restraint." Kevin's eyes flicked to Tavin, cold and unyielding. "My father believed in principles. The Empire taught me what those are worth. If he were here, he'd understand." Tavin nodded slowly, though doubt lingered in his expression. He knew better than to press further. Kevin's path was set, and there would be no turning back. The offensive began with a feint, Kevin's fleet drawing Imperial forces away from the true target. As the Empire scrambled to respond, Kevin's strike team infiltrated the command station. The operation was executed with surgical precision, Kevin leading from the front. Blaster fire echoed through the corridors, and the acrid scent of scorched metal filled the air. Kevin's forces reached the central command hub, where they planted charges to disable the station's power grid. The explosion rippled through the structure, plunging it into chaos. By the time the Empire's reinforcements arrived, Kevin's team was gone, leaving behind a crippled outpost and a message scrawled in the wreckage. "This is only the beginning." Back aboard the Vindicator, Kevin reviewed the mission's success with his officers. The operation had been a resounding victory, but it came at a cost. Casualties were mounting, and resources were stretched thin. Yet, as Kevin stood before his men, he spoke with unwavering conviction. "The Empire believes its power is absolute," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "They believe fear and oppression will keep them in control. But fear cuts both ways. Today, we show them what resistance looks like. Tomorrow, we'll show them what victory feels like." The crew erupted into cheers, their faith in Kevin unshaken. But as Kevin returned to his quarters, the weight of leadership pressed heavily on him. He stared out at the stars, his reflection in the viewport a reminder of how far he had come, and how far he still had to go. The Empire had struck back, but Kevin Lorne was not defeated. If anything, the conflict had only stoked the fire within him. He knew the battles ahead would be harder, the stakes higher, but he welcomed the challenge. The fight was far from over, and Kevin intended to see it through to the end. Kevin Lorne stood on the bridge of the Vindicator, staring out into the infinite void. The final battle loomed ahead, its gravity pressing down on everyone aboard. The stars shimmered with an indifferent beauty, a stark contrast to the chaos Kevin was about to unleash. The time for subterfuge and skirmishes had passed. The Empire had left him no choice but to meet them head-on, and Kevin intended to make them regret their arrogance. The Imperial fleet awaited in orbit above Terrios Prime, a fortress world that served as the nerve center for the sector's operations. Hundreds of ships bristled with firepower, their formation a testament to the Empire's might. Kevin's forces, though fewer in number, were hardened by months of relentless combat. They knew what was at stake. Victory here would shatter the Empire's control over the outer systems and ignite a rebellion across the galaxy. Failure would mean annihilation. Tavin Ral approached Kevin, his expression grim but resolute. "The fleet is in position," he said, glancing at the tactical display. "But we're outnumbered nearly 3-1. Kevin's gaze didn't waver from the viewport. Numbers have never won a war. Discipline, strategy, and resolve. That's what decides the outcome. Tavin hesitated, then nodded. "And what about luck?" Kevin allowed a faint smile. "We make our own luck, Commander. Let's get to work." The battle began with a feint, Kevin's vanguard engaging the Imperial outer line in a furious exchange of fire. The larger Imperial fleet responded predictably, tightening their formation to crush the perceived threat. It was a trap Kevin had meticulously designed. As the vanguard retreated, Kevin's reserve fleet emerged from the shadow of Terrios Prime's moon, catching the Empire's ships in a devastating crossfire. Explosions lit up the darkness, starships reduced to blazing wreckage. Kevin barked orders with surgical precision, his commands weaving the chaos into a calculated assault. The Vindicator charged into the fray, its powerful cannons tearing through enemy lines. Kevin's presence on the battlefield was palpable, his confidence infectious. His officers followed his lead without hesitation, their loyalty absolute. But the Empire was not so easily broken. From the depths of their formation emerged the Immortal, a colossal dreadnought, bristling with advanced weaponry. Its arrival turned the tide, its cannons unleashing a torrent of destruction that scattered Kevin's forces. The Vindicator shook violently as it absorbed the impact of the Immortal's assault. "Shields are failing," a crewman shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Kevin's response was calm, almost chilling. "Divert power from non-essential systems. Focus fire on the Immortal's forward batteries. We only need to disable them." Tavin leaned closer, his voice low. "Kevin, that ship is a fortress. If we engage it directly—" "We'll win," Kevin interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The Immortal is their linchpin. Take it out, and their entire formation collapses." Tavin didn't argue further, though the tension in his expression was unmistakable. Kevin's strategy was bold, bordering on reckless, but it was also their only chance. The battle raged on, the Vindicator leading a concentrated assault on the Immortal. Kevin's ships darted through the chaos, their coordinated strikes chipping away at the dreadnought's defenses. The Immortal responded with unrelenting fire, its cannons wreaking havoc on Kevin's fleet. The toll was heavy, but Kevin pressed on, his determination unwavering. As the Immortal began to falter, Kevin seized the opportunity. He ordered a boarding party to disable the ship from within, a move that required him to lead the charge personally. Tavin protested, but Kevin silenced him with a single look. This was his fight, his reckoning, and he would not delegate it. The boarding party breached the Immortal's hull amidst a hail of blaster fire. Kevin moved with precision, his every step calculated. His soldiers followed him without hesitation, their trust in him absolute. The corridors of the Immortal were a labyrinth of steel and fire, each turn bringing them closer to the ship's command center. Inside the Immortal's bridge, Admiral Torvin waited, a towering figure clad in gleaming armor. Torvin embodied the Empire's cold authority. He had studied Kevin's tactics, admired his ingenuity even as he sought to crush him. Now, the moment had come to face the man who had become the Empire's greatest threat. When Kevin burst onto the bridge, his blaster leveled, Torvin didn't flinch. "Kevin Lorne," the Admiral said, his voice a deep rumble. "I've heard much about you." Kevin's gaze was icy, his weapon steady. "Surrender, and I might let you live." Torvin chuckled, a sound devoid of humor. "You're bold, I'll give you that. But this ends here." The two men clashed, blaster fire ricocheting off the walls as chaos erupted around them. Kevin fought with a ferocity born of years of pain and purpose, each strike a testament to his resolve. Torvin matched him blow for blow, his strength and training making him a formidable opponent. As the battle raged, the Vindicator's forces gained the upper hand elsewhere on the Immortal. Systems failed, explosions ripped through the ship, and the tide of battle turned irrevocably in Kevin's favor. Finally, Kevin disarmed Torvin, his blaster aimed squarely at the Admiral's chest. "You've lost," Kevin said, his voice low but filled with conviction. Torvin met his gaze, defiant to the end. "Perhaps. You'll find that victory comes with its own price." Kevin pulled the trigger, ending the Admiral's life. There was no satisfaction in the act, only a grim sense of necessity. He turned to his men, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Set the charges. This ship goes down with the Empire." The Immortal exploded in a brilliant inferno, its destruction marking the end of the battle. Kevin's fleet emerged battered but victorious, their triumph a testament to their leader's indomitable will. As the wreckage of the Imperial fleet drifted into the void, Kevin stood on the bridge of the Vindicator, his expression unreadable. The cost had been immense. Lives lost, ships destroyed, and the toll of leadership etched into Kevin's very being. Yet, as he stared into the vastness of space, he knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had seen what one man could achieve, what resolve could accomplish in the face of tyranny. Kevin turned to Tavin, who stood silently beside him. "The Empire will rebuild," Kevin said, his tone resolute. "But so will we. This isn't the end." Tavin nodded, though his eyes held the weight of what they had endured. "What now?" Kevin's gaze returned to the stars, his expression hard but determined. "Now! We show them that the reckoning isn't over. It's only just begun."